My fiancée fabricated charges against me to have me locked up. She smirked and whispered, "Enjoy rotting in jail, you pathetic fool." She had no clue that the single phone call I was allowed went straight to my father, the chief of police. He strode into the precinct and calmly asked the duty officer, "Care to explain why my son is sitting here in cuffs? I'm a firefighter. My career revolves around charging into blazing infernos while everyone else flees in panic. It's a profession rooted in trust, iron discipline, and keeping your head when everything around you is chaos." I believed my relationship with my fiancée, Jessica, rested on those same bedrock values. Instead, it was soaked in kerosene, and she was simply biding her time for the perfect spark. That spark ignited last night. We'd been circling the same fight for months. It always came down to money, more precisely, her reckless spending of my money. I'm not rich, but I'm careful. I own my modest home outright. I pay every bill on time, and I've been steadily saving for the future. Jessica, however, treats credit cards like bottomless wishing wells that deliver luxury handbags and indulgent salon days. The argument boiled over again. She demanded I co-sign a loan for an extravagant new car she couldn't possibly afford on her own. I refused. My refusal was measured, reasonable, and absolute. This time, though, something inside her fractured. Her irritation morphed into a chilling, predatory rage. She began shrieking, calling me domineering and stingy. Then she crossed a line that altered everything. She seized a heavy crystal vase, a cherished keepsake from my late grandmother, and slammed it against the wall, exploding it into countless shards. Then she fixed her eyes on me with a weird, smug grin and raked her own forearm with her manicured nails, drawing a faint trail of blood. "Get out of my house!" she wailed, her voice suddenly shifting into a rehearsed, quivering panic. "Your house," I replied, my tone low and dangerously steady. "This is my house, Jessica." "Not for much longer," she snarled. Then she snatched her phone and called 911. I stood frozen in shock as I listened to her deliver a sobbing, award-worthy act to the dispatcher. She claimed I'd turned violent, that I'd hurled the vase at her, and that she feared for her life. It was a falsehood so brazen, so utterly detached from reality, that my mind reeled trying to absorb it. When the officers arrived, 2 in uniform, they saw a weeping, frantic woman with a scratch on her arm and broken glass scattered across the floor. They saw me, a man easily twice her size, standing silent and motionless. In these calls, procedure kicks in automatically. They don't dig for nuance. They assess immediate risk. They separated us, took her statement, and then approached me. As they snapped the cuffs on, Jessica stepped out onto the porch. Her tears had vanished, replaced by that same icy, triumphant sneer. She leaned in close while the officer escorted me to the cruiser and murmured, just loud enough for me, "Enjoy jail, loser." I said nothing. I simply met her gaze. I let her savor her supposed victory. At the station, they placed me in a small, sterile booking room. They removed my shoelaces and belt, recited my rights, and informed me I was entitled to 1 phone call. Jessica's whole scheme rested on one arrogant assumption: that I was isolated, that I was merely an ordinary firefighter with no influence, no connections, and no one to call. She knew I had a father in law enforcement. She'd met him a handful of times. She assumed he was some aging beat cop, maybe pushing papers until retirement. She had no idea of his true position. My father and I have a complicated history. My name is Matt Carter. I adopted my mother's maiden name at 18 because I wanted to carve my own path, free from anyone's legacy, and I refused to live under the long shadow cast by my father, the highly decorated, commanding, and often formidable chief of police for the entire metropolitan region. I picked up the receiver. I didn't dial an attorney. I called my dad. The hour I spent in that holding cell dragged like an eternity. It was a frigid, concrete cube reeking of disinfectant and despair. I wasn't afraid. I'm a firefighter. I faced far worse, but I felt a deep, visceral betrayal. Jessica hadn't merely lied. She had weaponized the very institution my father had devoted his life to protecting. I heard the thick metal door at the corridor's end buzz open. Footsteps approached, confident, deliberate. They didn't sound like the hesitant shuffle of an overworked public defender. They sounded like command presence. The steps halted outside my cell. Moments later, the tiny barred window filled with the face of the young officer who had arrested me. He looked ashen and visibly anxious. He fumbled the keys, swung the door open, and stammered, "Mr. Carter, you're free to leave. There's someone here for you." I walked down the hall and into the busy main floor of the station. Standing dead center was my father. He wasn't wearing his uniform, just a crisp dark suit, but he radiated absolute authority. The whole precinct seemed to recalibrate around him. Officers straightened their posture, voices dropped, and the atmosphere crackled with respect. He spotted me, and for a split second the stern lines of his face eased. He approached and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "You all right, son?" he asked quietly. "I'm good, Dad," I answered. He nodded, then turned to the desk sergeant, whose face suggested imminent cardiac arrest. My father never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His calm authority carried more weight than any outburst. "Sergeant Miller," he began evenly, "I was reviewing the initial arrest report on my son, Matthew Carter. I appear to be missing the section where the responding officers noted the distribution of glass fragments from the vase he supposedly threw. Were the shards predominantly inside the impact zone on the wall, or outside it?" The sergeant stuttered, "I'm not sure, Chief. I'd need to review the complete file." "Then do so," my father replied, "because physics is quite clear. An object hurled at a wall shatters and falls inward. An object smashed against a wall shatters and falls outward. I'd be disappointed if your officers overlooked such basic forensic evidence." He then addressed the young arresting officer, who was attempting to disappear into the background. "Officer Jennings," he said, glancing at the nameplate, "my son has zero history of violence. The complainant, his fiancée, has no prior domestic incidents on record. You had two contradictory accounts. What specific, irrefutable evidence justified an immediate custodial arrest rather than simply separating the parties for the evening?" "Sir," the officer managed, perspiring heavily. "The complainant displayed a visible injury, a scratch on her arm. Department policy requires. Policy also requires sound judgment." My father interrupted, voice still low but now edged with steel. "It further requires thorough investigation. Did you, for example, examine the complainant's fingernails for traces of my son's skin or blood to support her claim that he seized her? Or did you simply accept the performance of an emotional woman and place a fellow first responder in restraints?" He let the silence linger. He wasn't shouting. He was instructing, and it was chilling to witness. He wasn't abusing power. He was insisting the job be performed with the professionalism and rigor he demanded from everyone under his command. He was leveraging his position not to quash the case, but to guarantee it received the department's most intense scrutiny. He turned back to me. "Go home, Matt," he said. "I've reassigned the case to Detective Harding in DV. He's the finest we have. He'll reach out tomorrow. Stay away from Jessica. Don't contact her. Let the process run its course." I left the station a free man. As I stepped into the damp night, my phone vibrated. A text from Jessica. "I see you're already out. This isn't finished. I'm filing for an emergency protective order tomorrow. The house will be mine. You'll never step foot in it again." I didn't respond. I climbed into my car and drove. Not home, but to my attorney's office. Jessica believed this was merely a domestic spat. She had no idea it was escalating into all-out war. Update 2. The days after my release were a blur of calculated, decisive moves. Jessica assumed she held all the cards. She thought she controlled the story. She never realized that while she plotted her next step, my father's discreet involvement had already flipped the entire board. First stop. My lawyer. I laid out every detail, including my father's role. My attorney, a shrewd and practical veteran, instantly grasped the shift. "This alters the entire dynamic," he said. Her power came from the looming threat of a protracted criminal case. That threat is neutralized. Now we take the fight to her. He immediately filed an emergency countermotion in family court. We didn't merely defend, we accused her of malicious prosecution and abuse of legal process. We included my sworn declaration recounting the actual events, specifically that she had destroyed the vase herself. We asked the court to reject her protective order request and instead issue one against her, granting me exclusive occupancy of my own home during proceedings. While the legal filings moved forward, Detective Harding launched his investigation. Harding is a department icon, quiet, meticulous, with an almost supernatural ability to detect deception. He didn't simply re-interview Jessica. He systematically unraveled her narrative. He began with physical evidence. As my father had foreseen, crime scene photographs revealed most glass fragments lay outside the wall's impact point, consistent with the vase being smashed against the wall, not thrown at it. Next, the injury. A thin, uniform scratch perfectly matching self-infliction by fingernail. No bruising, no defensive marks, no evidence of struggle. Following my father's earlier prompt, he obtained a warrant for her phone records. They uncovered texts sent to her closest friend in the week prior. "He won't co-sign the loan. I'm done. Don't worry. I have a plan to get everything I deserve. If he won't give me the lifestyle I want, I'll take it myself." Damning proof of premeditation. But the knockout blow came from an unlikely witness. My elderly next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Harding, ever thorough, canvassed the block. Mrs. Gable had been on her porch that evening and overheard everything through her open window. She described Jessica's yelling and the crash, then noted something pivotal. After the glass shattered, Jessica's tone abruptly shifted from genuine anger to exaggerated, theatrical sobbing. "It didn't sound authentic," Mrs. Gable told him. "It sounded rehearsed." The final nail was Jessica's own overconfidence. Thinking victory was assured, she had already contacted a real estate agent for a home appraisal. The agent, unsettled by emerging details, forwarded the email correspondence to my attorney. In it, Jessica boldly declared she expected full possession within days and planned to list the property immediately. The evidence was no longer circumstantial, it was overwhelming. A meticulously documented plot to fabricate accusations, remove me from my residence, and liquidate my chief asset. Presented with our countermotion and Harding's preliminary findings, the family court judge ruled precisely as we anticipated. He denied Jessica's protective order against me and granted mine against her. She was legally prohibited from approaching within 500 feet of me or my home. The moment that order was served marked the instant she understood defeat. She had tried to evict me from my own house. Instead, she was banished from it. Her scheme didn't merely collapse, it boomeranged with crushing force. She was no longer the victim. She became the subject of a criminal probe. Final update. For months have passed since my life was nearly shattered by deception. Today, that nightmare is formally and decisively over. When the justice system is properly engaged, it can move with frightening speed and precision. The criminal case against Jessica advanced rapidly. The DA's office, armed with Harding's exhaustive report, charged her with filing a false police report, perjury in her sworn protective order affidavit, and attempted insurance fraud after she submitted a claim for the vandalism. Confronted with irrefutable proof, the forensic analysis, incriminating texts, Mrs. Gable's statement, and the realtor emails, her attorney recognized a trial would be disastrous. He urged her to accept a plea. She pleaded guilty to filing a false report. The remaining counts were dismissed in exchange. She escaped incarceration, but consequences were unavoidable. 2 years probation, a hefty fine, mandatory therapy, and a permanent criminal record. Her effort to label me an abuser ended with her being labeled a convicted criminal. The civil side proved even more gratifying. The engagement was obviously terminated. I retained the ring, a conditional gift whose condition, marriage, she voided through her malice. I sold it and applied the proceeds to legal costs. But my attorney pressed further. We sued her civilly for malicious prosecution, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We sought compensation for the destroyed vase. We pursued full accountability. Her defense was futile. The criminal plea established civil liability. We settled out of court on highly favorable terms. She transferred a substantial portion of her personal savings to me as damages. The agreement also imposed a lifelong, ironclad non-disclosure clause. She is legally barred from ever mentioning me, publicly or privately, for the rest of her days. Any breach triggers ruinous financial penalties. I have effectively erased myself from her existence. Last I heard, Jessica's world has collapsed. Her record blocks decent employment. Friends, appalled by her actions, have cut ties. She is financially drained, socially ostracized, and isolated. She tried to seize my home. In the end, she lost everything she had. As for me, I'm recovering. The ordeal left marks, but it also forged something stronger. My bond with my father, strained by years of stubborn distance, has been fully restored. The silence is gone, replaced by regular calls, ball games, and shared meals. He's my dad again. Jessica's entire plot rested on the delusion that I was vulnerable and solitary. She miscalculated on both fronts. My reserved demeanor isn't frailty. It's the controlled strength of someone who knows when to wait and when to strike. And I was never truly alone. I had family. a trump card she never suspected. She gloated and wished me misery behind bars. But I'm the one who walks free today. Free from her deceit, and free to construct a new future built on solid truth, while she now inhabits a cage entirely of her own design.